Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today is the final recipe in the Easter Progressive Meal series that Our Heritage Works and I have been working on together. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope it will help you plan your Easter holiday meal. Whether you choose a brunch or a lunch or a dinner, one or all of these recipes will be perfect to go with your Easter holiday. And some of these recipes are traditions in my family, and maybe they will become traditions in your family. So the recipe that I'm making today is my version of hot cross buns. Gluten-free, of course. Let me know if you make hot cross buns for this holiday. There are so many variations out there. It depends on the spices that you like. It depends on how sweet you like them. It depends on what kind of dried fruit you'd like to put inside of them. If you've never had a hot cross bun before, what they are is kind of a roll or bun that is sweet. A little bit on the sweet side, not super sweet, at least the version that I make. And then you make a paste of flour and water to make the cross, and then you bake them. I've seen a lot of recipes that use powdered sugar, so it's more of a glaze for the cross. And sometimes if you use more of a glaze for the cross, you would put it on after baking. But I do mine, I think, which is more of a traditional way, is a flour paste. But we'll get to that in a minute. There are so many variations of dried fruit. I know they use currants or raisins or a combination of both. I'm actually using dried blueberries today. And they're little teeny tiny dried blueberries that I've dehydrated myself. If you watched one of my more recent videos with my carrot raisin salad, you'll know that raisins aren't my favorite. But I do love blueberries. And these work really well in these buns. And there's a lot of different spice combinations that go into it. I actually make my own mixed spice combination. And I usually make a decent sized batch of it, and then I store it in a jar because I save jars. And then I just label what it is. And there's a lot of different recipes out there for mixed spice. It's not necessarily an American thing. Although if you look and you research, they will compare pumpkin pie spice with this mixed spice. Very similar, but just a little bit different. I will put the equivalents of spices that I use to make my mixed spice blend in the description box below. But if you don't want to use one or all of those spices, you could use pumpkin pie spice or just cinnamon, whatever your favorite spice is. But this is just the combination that I use. And I know it looks like I have a lot going on, but these really come together so fast. And the first thing that I'm doing is I've actually got my oven preheating to 350. In my little tiny saucepan here, I have a 1/4 cup of honey, and then I have 1 orange that I'm gonna juice and add to my honey, and this will be the glaze that I make. Traditionally, the glaze that is brushed on top after these are done baking, I believe is apricot jam. I've made these before with peach jam, and that works really good. But I actually prefer the orange and honey glaze because I do have some orange peel that we'll be adding into the batter. And I should let you know, traditionally these are rolls that are made with yeast. But as I have mentioned before, I don't use yeast. And I've actually made these before with my sourdough starter mix. And you could do that, although it does yield a little bit heavier of a bun. Just in case there's any seeds, I'm just going to strain my orange juice in with my honey. There's my honey and orange juice mixture that I'm going to heat up to make my glaze. I have a muffin pan here that I've greased. You could use whatever you want to grease it. I used bacon grease, but you could use coconut oil, olive oil, whatever you like to grease, butter. I've not tried making this in muffin liners or cupcake liners. I don't know if they would stick or not. I always have just greased the pan. And as always, you want everything at room temperature. And this is more of a batter than an actual roll that you would roll out and knead. So there's not a lot of flour in here, and it will be more of kind of a really thick cake batter. So the first thing we're gonna do is mix our dry ingredients together. I have 1 1/4 cups of my gluten-free flour. I have a 1/4 cup of tapioca starch. And then in this bowl, I have 2 teaspoons of my mixed spice, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. All in here. And then my 1/4 cup of tapioca starch, all in here. You could use potato starch if you want to, or even cornstarch. And even though tapioca starch is already in my gluten-free flour mix, this 1/4 cup of extra tapioca starch really helps to lighten up the dough, or the batter. Now that our dry ingredients are mixed together, I'm going to set that aside and we'll move on to the wet ingredients. Which again, it looks like I have a lot going on here. So right here, I've got a 1/4 cup of melted and cooled coconut oil, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon of orange zest, 2 eggs, a 1/4 cup of honey, 3 tablespoons of milk, and 1 heaping cup of yogurt. You could make this a dairy-free version and substitute a dairy-free yogurt and then dairy-free milk for this as well. And then right here, I've got 1 tablespoon of chia seeds that has been soaking in 2.5 tablespoons of water. And you can see it is really gelatinous. If you've never used chia seeds before, they really clump together and make this gooey, gelatinous mixture, which is really good in gluten-free baked things. And if you've never seen chia seeds before, this is what they look like. Little teeny tiny seeds. And then after soaking, this is what it looks like. It's really gelatinous and sticking together. And this equivalent, this 1 tablespoon to the 2.5 tablespoons of water, is what is considered a chia egg. And I've had this soaking for maybe a couple of hours. So that's ready. So the first thing we're going to do is start mixing our wet ingredients together. So I'm going to pour in my coconut oil. So with my coconut oil, I'm going to add in my 1/4 cup of honey. If you're using white sugar, this would be a 1/2 cup of white sugar. Of course, you could use brown sugar if you wanted to, coconut sugar, date sugar, whatever sweetener you prefer. This is a really big spatula for such a small measuring cup. So I'm just going to mix my honey and my coconut oil just to get them mixed together before we add in the rest of the ingredients. Now our 2 eggs. While I was getting my egg ready, you can see how much my coconut oil has solidified with my honey. There's my first egg. If you need to get your coconut oil and honey out of your whisk to mix in your egg, do that. And as with any mixture like this, it will start to look curdled and a little bit chunky, but just keep going. There's my second egg. And once you've got that mixed around, we'll just add in the rest of our ingredients. There's my chia egg, my orange zest, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, 3 tablespoons of milk. I'm going to get this mixed around before I add in my yogurt. I always find it so interesting that chia seeds look like poppy seeds. And it's okay if it looks a little bit lumpy. Now my heaping cup of yogurt. And this is full fat yogurt. Unsweetened, unflavored yogurt. And give this a really good mix. I'm going to switch to my spatula before I add in the dry ingredients. Once you've got that all mixed together, set that aside. We're going to make the paste that will be the crosses that go on top of our buns. And I've got about a 1/2 cup of white rice flour and then a cup of water. It really just depends on how thick you want your paste to be. We want it to be solid enough that we can pipe it with a piping bag and form our crosses, but you don't want it to be liquid enough that it just oozes all over. So I'm just going to start pouring in my water and eyeball the right consistency. As always, I should have gotten a bigger bowl. it might be a little bit too thin. So all we would need to do is just add a little bit more white rice flour. We'll just go a little bit at a time until it's the piping consistency. We're just about there. A little bit more flour. And that is about the consistency that I am looking for. And the reason I'm not using my gluten-free flour mix for this paste is it doesn't seem to pipe out of a piping bag very well. It seems to get stuck. I'm not sure if it's because the almond flour lumps up, but white rice flour works really good. And it stays a really nice white color. And of course, this is a lot more than we need. And that's just fine. So bring back your batter here. I'm going to pour in my I'm going to dump in my dry ingredients. Scraping the bowl as you go. And once it starts looking like this, where it's mostly absorbed, I'm going to add in my dried blueberries. Have a big spoon. Bring over your muffin pan. If you were using raisins, you would use 3/4 to 1 cup of raisins. And this was 3/4 of a cup of dried blueberries. And this makes 12 muffins. I usually put a little bit in each one and then top them off so they're all about the same size. And I just try to get them as even as possible. If you're like me, they all look like it's the same amount in the muffin pan, but once you bake them, you'll really see how uneven they are. So bring back your paste. I'm just going to pour it into my piping bag here. Again, we won't use all of it. And then we'll just start making our crosses. And depending on how much these puff up in the oven, it might disrupt your crosses, but do your best. Now the other way. And this is exactly what we want our flour-water ratio to be. You want it to hold its shape. It is oozing a little bit, but it holds its shape to make a really nice cross. Okay, that looks really good. These go into the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, maybe 30. And while these are in the oven, I'm going to turn my honey and orange juice on about medium. We want this to be a nice glaze syrup to brush on top of our buns when they come out of the oven. While my buns are in the oven, I have my orange juice and honey simmering. And I'm just occasionally swirling the pot. I want this to be like a syrup consistency. Nice and springy. You want to make sure they're done in the middle. And they are nice and golden brown around the edges. And it looks like I did a pretty good job of making them all the same size. There are a couple that are a little bit skimpy, but that's all right. And it's okay if they look like short little squatty buns. Again, this is just my version of a hot cross bun. Now that they're out of the oven, these went for about 25 minutes. And my honey orange juice syrup has reduced down quite a bit. It is a little bit thicker. I took it off the heat, but I'm going to set it aside. It will thicken up a little bit more as it cools. And once these have cooled in the pan just a little bit, want to just very carefully loosen the edges. And then I have a cooling rack on top of some parchment paper. When I brush my glaze on, it will drip down and catch any of those drips. You could glaze them in the pan, but I find it's harder to get them out of the pan. And if you like them to have a crispy bottom and sides, glazing them will make them a little bit soggy in the pan. So very carefully take them out of the pan. Nice and golden brown. You'll find out how good of a job you did greasing your pan at this point. And these are still warm, and my syrup is still warm, which is just perfect. But my syrup is such a nice consistency. And we'll just start glazing our hot cross buns. And I'm just going over them again just to use up the rest of my syrup. You can see there's really not very much left at all. And if you're not a fan of orange flavor, you could have used lemon zest and lemon juice for this syrup, if that's what you prefer. Or you don't have to use the citrus flavor at all. You could just use apricot jam or peach jam, something like that for your glaze. And I don't even mind if a little bit is running down the sides. And it will soak in, and they won't have as much shine as they do right now, but they sure look good. You could serve these warm. I usually let mine come to room temperature, and then I can stack them all on a platter and then serve them that way. If you're serving buffet style, they would look really nice on a platter. If you want them to stay a little bit warm, you could put them in a bread basket wrapped in a towel, but with this glaze, they will stick together a little bit. So just be mindful of that. And as with a lot of things like this, sometimes the flavors come through a little bit better the next day. And they're still pretty warm and sticky from that glaze. But let me show you what one looks like on the inside. You could put some butter or even more jam on these. And you can see all my little blueberries in there. And the crosses look really good. They kind of sunk into the batter a little bit, but you can still see where they are. So good. Do they look exactly like a hot cross bun? No. But it's a really good gluten-free version of a hot cross bun. And of course, yeast-free. If you're avoiding yeast like I am, this is a really good substitution. And because they are still warm, they are a little bit flimsy. But once they cool off, and then if you put them in the fridge, they really hold their shape very well. And because I used blueberries, there is a blueberry flavor. But if you had used raisins or even golden raisins, something like that, it would of course have that flavor. And if you find that these aren't spicy enough for you, you could always add in another ½ teaspoon of the spice mixture, or whatever your favorite spices are. And chia seeds can sometimes have a distinct flavor, but you don't really notice the chia seed flavor because of the spices. And of course the blueberries. But it really is so good. And with that orange and honey syrup that we put on top, it just gives that little bit extra orange flavor. And you don't really taste the coconut oil either. But the coconut oil really helps to get this darker crust. Really so good. And I'll tell you, I've never had a hot cross bun before. It wasn't something that I ever had before. Probably because it had raisins and I wasn't really interested in eating raisins. So I've only ever had a gluten-free hot cross bun. If hot cross buns are something that you've been missing, make this recipe and let me know what you think. Let me know how it compares to your hot cross bun recipe. There's so many variations out there, Again, this is my variation, and of course gluten-free and yeast-free. And the texture of these is so good. It almost feels like it's a little bit on the wet side. And you know, the chia seed flavor really is not very strong. If you've used chia seeds in any of your baked goods before, let me know. Let me know what you think of them. This might be your first time trying a recipe with chia seeds. They really are such a good thing to work with, especially with gluten-free baked goods. They add such a nice texture in something like this. But after sitting in the fridge or even sitting out on your counter, they really hold their moisture well. They're not dense and heavy like gluten-free baked goods can be. And even though they don't have yeast in them, they really are super light and super airy. Not exactly like a dinner roll or a sweet bun, but such a good gluten-free version, and especially if you're avoiding yeast. As I mentioned, this is the last video and recipe in the Easter series that Our Heritage Works and I have been doing together. If you've enjoyed this series and this collaboration, let me know. We might have more planned coming soon for other holidays, or maybe just something fun headed your way. It's so fun to share recipes with other people. As you guys know, that's what I'm doing, and that's what Our Heritage Works is doing. We're sharing recipes with you that are from our family traditions, some new and some old. But that's what makes it so much fun, is we get to share and try new things maybe. Maybe this will be a new holiday tradition at your house. But thanks for watching. Thank you to Our Heritage Works for collaborating on this Easter series with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.